My name is Ariana. I am a violinist, a teacher, a musician, a human. This video will be the first half, or maybe the first third, depending on how long this takes, on a lesson about sound production and bow control. You'll come out being able to play with a consistent and resonant sound throughout your whole bow. So that might sound like a simple task to you, but as it is, on the violin, often a simple result is born of a complex process. Through a variety of steps and through gaining some understanding on sound production, you will be able to, in the comfort of your home, achieve a decent sound on your violin. This tutorial will be most useful for you if you are in the beginning or intermediate stages of your violin playing journey. However, I want you to keep in mind that no matter what your level is, you should and you can play with a decent quality sound. I have seen and I have taught many small children to play at a very high quality, even if they're playing easy music. You can make it sound good. That is how you will progress. That also will allow you to play for your friends and for them to enjoy it. Now to the substance of this video. There are three main factors. Why am I holding up a 5? There are three main factors that affect your sound production. So the first factor is bow placement, and that is the position of the bow on the string. The second factor is bow pressure. So how much weight are you putting down on the string? So obviously your strings are horizontal and your bow will be putting down vertical weight on the string that you have to control when you're producing a sound. And the third, why am I doing this? Very Italiano. And the third factor that will affect your sound production is bow speed. And that is kind of self-explanatory. It is literally just the rate at which your bow moves across the string. To get the consistent and resonant sound that we are looking for, each of these variables has to be constant and in balance with the other two. I'm going to be talking about how to do all of those things. For our purposes in this video, we will just focus on the first variable, which is the bow position / bow placement. So that is what we're going to talk about now. To get our basic sound, we need our bow to be, well, I'll get closer so you can see, exactly in the center between the bridge and the fingerboard. It should be parallel to the bridge and the fingerboard, or you might say also perpendicular to the string. And thirdly, the hair of the bow will be flat on the string. And this position, this position needs to be maintained throughout your full bow stroke. I'll show you what that looks like on an open string. I'll just play an A string for you. So I hope you saw from that the bow didn't slide around. It wasn't, moving around. The angle wasn't changing. I don't know if you could tell that the hair of the bow was flat, but it was. My sound was fairly consistent. It wasn't the most interesting sound, but it was decent quality. And that is what we're going for. Okay, now I'll just play a little simple something on multiple strings. I'll make up a little musical blurb so that you can see what this should look like in action. Okay, so that is more or less what it should look like. Now let's talk about how to actually achieve this motion. We're going to start by observing the way that the arm functions at different points in the bow. Obviously, the human body was not made to play the violin, so we're going to have to do a lot of compensating for our anatomical shortcomings. First thing, let's start with some geometry. And if you were traumatized by high school geometry, don't worry, we're just going to be talking about some very basic shapes, nothing too complicated. And the second disclaimer I should give is that everyone's body is slightly different, everyone's anatomy is slightly different. So when you apply these concepts in your own practice, your body might look slightly different than mine, but if you're physically comfortable and your bow is doing what it should do, then I'm sure you have it right for you. Anyway, to our shapes. First shape is going to be a triangle. When I place the bow on the string at the frog, and the bow is in the right position and all of that, you'll see kind of a rough triangle here, which goes from my contact point, that's where the bow is on the string, from the contact point to my elbow, from my elbow to my shoulder, so this, and from my shoulder back to my contact point. That is our triangle. Now, if I put down my bow at the middle of the bow right there, you'll see that we have a different shape. We have a kind of like a square or parallelogram. So we go from contact point to hand, hand to elbow, elbow to shoulder, and shoulder back to contact point. Now I will move the bow to the tip. And you see, we have what is kind of like a triangle again. I'll turn this way so you can see. Or kind of like a very defunct quadrilateral. I don't even know what you would call that. Anyway, so we go from the tip to the shoulder, shoulder to the hand, and hand back to the contact point, which is at the tip. We just want to maintain that position of the bow on the string with a flat hair perpendicular to the strings or parallel to the bridge, depending on which P word you prefer. Let's review that. So we have the triangle at the frog, quadrilateral at the middle, or square, let's just say square, and sort of triangle at the tip. Now again, if your arms are particularly short, you probably will reach a full extended position before you get to the tip of the bow. And that's okay. People tend to have different ideas about should you force yourself to reach the tip or not. I am inclined to say go as far as you can without hurting yourself. If you don't make it all the way to the tip of the bow, then it's better to not be in pain. I think that's a good concept for life, you know, like don't go overboard with these things. But try to find an extended position where instead of forcing yourself to the tip of the bow, you sort of relax your muscles into allowing you to extend your arm a bit more. You just want to sort of relax your shoulder to drop it and allow yourself to go a little bit farther. Now, if your arms are long, you probably can go beyond the tip because you have room to open your arm more, and therefore if you extend your arm all the way, you'll be way beyond the tip. And just keep an eye out for that. Eventually, you'll build up the muscle memory that will allow you to know when you are going too far, and you'll get used to the motion. So just a couple of other things to note here. The first is when I'm in this triangle position, note the angle, I'll move a little closer again, note the angle between my hand and the bow. You'll see that this angle is fairly wide, kind of open. Now when I go to the middle of the bow, or as I go towards the middle, that angle closes a bit. It's a little bit more like a right angle here. And when I go to the tip, I'll move back so you can see, when I go to the tip, there is a much tighter angle. It is important that your hand, your right arm, and your hand and wrist are flexible so that you can allow this change to occur. Don't worry, you're not going to drop the bow. Just try to be gentle with it and allow these positions to change fluidly so that you can get a nice, consistent tone. Now I'm just going to break down the different parts of the bow so that you can see how the motion is different from one part to the next. And really this is just going to be in the lower and the upper halves because that's sort of where the motion changes. So let's look at the lower half. When I go from the frog to the middle, what part of my arm moves the most? Do you see what changes? See how this elbow moves back and my forearm starts to open a bit so that I end up in this relaxed square position? See, that's the motion that you need to have in the lower half. Now in the upper half, you're going to be going from the square position, remember, to our large triangle, and see what in my arm, I'll move back so you can see better, what in my arm changes to achieve that change of shape. You see? It's mostly my forearm doing the work. There's a little adjustment in my upper arm. Obviously there's some adjustment with my hand, we already talked about that, but mostly the motion is coming from my forearm. You kind of have to imagine that there is a groove right here. Now if the bow is moving around, you're not going to get a constant sound. And that rhymed. I've been reading a lot of Elizabethan poetry recently. Nerd confessions. Anyway, okay, so the last thing that I mentioned was keeping your bow flat on the string. And that just means that you're using all of the hair of the bow. If your bow is rolling back and forth on the string, you're not going to be able to get a full sound because you're not using all of the hair, which is what creates friction with the string and gives you a sound. I'll just show you what that sounds like briefly. if I'm not playing with a full sound. See, if the bow is flipping around like this, you're not going to get a good sound. Okay, now I'll give you some practice methods. The first thing I would recommend you doing is bow placements. That just means what you do is you put down your bow on the string at random different places on the bow. So it could be at the frog, be in the middle, could be somewhere in between, could be in the upper half, could be at the tip. At each point where you place the bow, you want to make sure that your angle is correct, that all of the hair is on the string, and that your body is in a comfortable position. So that is the goal of this exercise, just to get what the feeling is like at the different places on the bow. I would recommend doing this in the mirror. When you're practicing with a mirror, don't be looking for how your complexion reacted to your last facial. Make sure that your violin is set up so that you can actually see what your bow is doing, and that don't be distracted with yourself. You are not important. Oh no, yes, of course you are important, but for this skill, what's important is to see exactly the angle of the bow on the string. So make sure that you can actually see that. So I'd say stand sort of like I am now, to the side, so that you can actually observe the placement of your bow on the string. If you place the bow like this, and you think, oh, that feels pretty good, and then you check in the mirror and you see, oh wow, my angle is way off, you can adjust it, and you will gradually get used to the correct feeling. This exercise is most effective when you do a little bit each practice session. It's really trying to build an awareness of your bow in space. It's kind of about proprioception, and that's not something that you can gain by doing this for 1 hour once and then not doing it again for the next 2 weeks because it actually drove you crazy. The next practice method would be to play in small segments of the bow. So let's say we'll take this much bow here and just play and just make sure that the bow is in the right place and that you feel comfortable. The middle is probably the easiest because you don't have any large changes. Also try in the lower half, try in every part of the bow. And observe how your arm is moving. Make sure you find a position that is comfortable. I cannot stress that enough. If you're not comfortable doing that, then you never will be in any piece that includes that part of the bow, and I'm pretty sure every piece you play will include each part of the bow. Get accustomed to the feeling, and again, use the mirror. Another thing you can do is look at where your bow touches the string and make sure that your bow doesn't shift on the string while you're playing. What I see is that the contact point doesn't change. That is probably the best way to get to know how your bow is moving correctly, because most of the time when you're playing, you won't be staring in the mirror. If you're playing on stage or for friends, you're not going to be setting up a mirror in front of yourselves. You're just going to be playing for them, and looking at your bow on the string will allow you to regulate what you're doing. And the third practice method I would recommend is just extending those segments. Play within half of the bow, play within the whole bow. It's easier to play in shorter segments. It's a little bit more complicated the longer those segments get. So gradually expand the amount of bow that you use. All of these steps, all of these practice methods, don't do them for more than a few minutes. As I said before, it can drive you crazy. It's a lot of very specific and focused work. Just do it, enjoy it, get used to the feeling in your body, and then move on to something else. Come back to it the next day. Let it be part of your routine. It's more useful to do a little each day, and your body will gradually learn these motions. When you are playing your favorite song or working on one of your favorite pieces, you're not always thinking about exactly where your bow is placed, that your body will respond naturally to your instincts with the music. That is your ultimate goal. As a violinist, as an instrumentalist, as a musician, is to be able to communicate something organically without having to think about each element. Of course, to reach that point, you do have to think about each step in the process. And that is why I have given you this to practice. Please stay tuned for the next video, which will cover how to control the pressure that you put on the string and the speed of the bow, and then how to balance all of these 3 different factors. These are concepts that you will use throughout your entire violin playing life. Please feel free to comment and let me know how it's going. While you're commenting, don't forget that there is a subscribe button, there is a like button. I won't tell you what to do, but they're there and you can do with them what you will. Lastly, if you want individual instruction or you want to work in more depth with me, I am a teacher. I offer private lessons, group lessons, supervised practice sessions, which I think are very useful if you haven't been doing this for very long, or even if you have, it can be helpful to have another set of ears or someone guiding you through the process of your work, which is of course different than exactly what you'll be getting in your lessons. So feel free to contact me. I'll put all of my contact info in the description box below. I also have an Instagram where I post some stuff. I'll also put a link for that. I just started this Instagram account. I've never had an Instagram before. I'm very new to this technology thing, you guys. I don't deserve to be a millennial, and yet here I am. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you learned something, and see you next time. Bye bye.
Peace.